NextGen America. And I'm just so happy to see you all here today on such short notice in this beautiful room. We're going to hear some dope speakers. We have Jordan, who is our rising fellow, as well as Jared, who's also a student here at UW-Madison and is also a fellow as well. But before we get started, I just want to ground us.
America is NextGen America is a national organization aimed at trying to mobilize young people to turn out to vote in the upcoming elections and to elect progressives up and down the ticket. I am honored and privileged today to introduce one of the most profound and influential minds in American judicial history. Appointed under President Barack Obama in 2009, Eric Holder made history by being the first African American to ever hold office of the Attorney General of these United States of America. Throughout his career, he has fought tirelessly for the rights of all Americans, regardless of background. He has worked to reform the policies and practices of our criminal justice system, including launching an investigation to the over in this country. We owe him a profound debt of gratitude for his legacy of service. Wisconsin is one of the most important states in the country in the fight against gerrymandering and voter suppression. Eric Holder has spent his career ensuring everyone is capable of exercising their most basic right to vote and to be treated equally under the law. As Attorney General, Holder acted as the respondent in a landmark Supreme Court case on voter suppression and challenged state laws on voting regulations. Here in Wisconsin, he has pushed back against laws that would disproportionately disenfranchise people of color and young people. Today, Eric Holder remains working on voting rights.
So how are you all doing today? How y'all doing today? You know, I mean, look, I got you out of class, right? Who's missing class right now? Oh, I was actually only kidding. You know, all right. My daughter, who was a University of Wisconsin-Madison student, said that she couldn't come because she had to go to class. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Okay. See, we have all these, I'll do like Donald Trump does. See, we have all these cameras here, right? Yeah. We like the media, unlike our president. Okay, come on, come on. Well, this, well. Okay. That's okay. All right. Anybody else? Well, it's good to be in Wisconsin. We were in Milwaukee yesterday. Did a couple of things. We were in Madison. Did an event last night. And that's because Wisconsin is such an important state, as Mr. Jordan indicated. If you look at, I got to say the name, under Governor Walker's leadership, the Republicans have really, I believe, systematically attacked the vote in this state. And if you look at what Republicans have done really on a national scale, I think our democracy is under attack by really trying to take away from the people the voice that we have under our founding documents. They're trying to make it more difficult for people to vote. They're trying to restructure the system through this process called gerrymandering, such that your vote is not as significant as it should be. After the census in 2010 and the redistricting that happened in 2011, Republicans here in Wisconsin did some pretty amazing things. It resulted in this, I wrote this down because I want to be statistically correct here. In 2012, the elections that were held here in Wisconsin, Republicans got, if you look at aggregate, less than 50% of the vote statewide, and yet they got 60 of the 99 seats in the state assembly. Now think about it, less than half the vote, just about 60% of the representation. And as people have looked at that and tried to study it and tried to figure out all the reasons why that happened, it comes down to how the lines were drawn in 2011. Now those lines have stayed in place from 2011 for the course of this decade, and that has resulted in a congressional delegation that has been locked in as well. The numbers there are, Republicans have 5 of the 8 seats, again, although they have received generally less than 50% of the vote. And all of the elections that have been decided at the congressional level, none have been decided at less than an 11% differential, which means that none of the elections, congressional elections that occur here in Wisconsin, are really competitive races. I mean, less than 11%. So these are districts that are, I think, unfairly drawn, and they are in the process, they lock voters out of the process, in essence. You know, it's a hard thing when you have numbers like that and people say, well, you know, my vote doesn't really count. And you want to say, no, you've got to get to the polls, and every vote does count. But if you have a system like that, your vote is not as important, not as significant as it should be. And if you look at what has happened in Washington, D.C., you see that gerrymandering intensifies polarization, it increases dysfunction. And here's why. If you've got these safe districts, right? Let's say you're a Republican in a safe district. You're not worried about a general election. You're not worried about your Democratic opponent. You're really worried about getting a primary you're worried about having a more right-wing person show up in a primary. And as a result, you don't interact with your Democratic colleagues. That you are then beholden to those people, those interests that are pushing the right. 97% of people in this country want to have an expansion of background checks when it comes to the sale of guns. 70% of the people in this country want to ban the sale of assault weapons. About 60% of people in this country decide they don't want to have the sale of these high-capacity magazines. And yet, because the NRA, the right-wing side, the gun lobby, has the ear of the Republicans in both at the state legislative level, and especially in Congress, people on the right, Republicans, can basically ignore that which the people want to have done and suffer no electoral consequences. And that is something that's got to change. Now, March 24th, I think we're going to see some movement. You know, we have already seen some movement as a result of the gutsy, eloquent, and dedicated kids that we have seen, young people who we've seen from high school in Florida. And both in Washington, D.C. and all around this country, the voices of young people demanding that, given those numbers that I just shared with you, that we have meaningful reform when it comes to gun safety measures. Now, you all are not much older than those high school students. And you cannot cede to them the responsibility for the movement that I think they're going to help precipitate in this country. You all have got to be out there as well. Now, March 24th is a Saturday, so I don't, you have to do Saturday classes, right? All right. And if you do have a Saturday class, I'll sign your cuts, whatever. The 82nd Attorney General of the United States is giving permission on March 24th to cut class and be a part of a march. I assume there's going to be one here in Madison. If there's not one here in Madison, fine, be there. Let your voice be heard. Let your bodies be seen as being behind this effort for responsible gun safety measures. This is a time for the people to be heard. It's a time for the politicians to understand that there are potential political consequences. Even in these gerrymandered districts, there are potential political consequences if they don't heed the voices of the people, what it is that we want to have done. And these are only logical steps. They're just logical kinds of things. You know, a background check to make sure that a person who's going to buy a gun doesn't have a domestic violence restraining order against them, doesn't have some kind of mental health issues, is not a person who has a prior felony, a prior violent conviction. You know, these are the kinds of things that just make sense. And for whatever reason, the gun lobby opposes it. The right, out of fear, doesn't do anything. And the Republican Party has been identified with those folks. So as progressives, as Democrats, March 24th, I want to see every one of you out there and bring about 10, 15 friends with you, okay? Now, you look at here in Wisconsin, once the gerrymandering was done, and you had these legislatures that were in control in the numbers that I indicated, I can remember that 60 out of 99 seats, they then decided, all right, so we've got control here far out of proportion to the number of votes that we received. Let's make sure that we try to ensure the continuation of this system. And so they then decided that they would have passed these voter ID laws. And you've seen this around the country. We have one here in Wisconsin. And the estimates are that about 45,000 people, most of whom were African American, were denied the opportunity to cast a ballot in the 2016 presidential election. Now, that's a pretty significant number when you think that Trump won the state by about 22,000 votes. And again, the estimates, good study, say that about 45,000 people were denied an opportunity to cast a ballot because of these voter ID laws. And these voter ID laws are all supposed to be about attempting to prevent voter fraud. Now, the Brennan Center, it's a nonpartisan 501c charitable organization, has done a bunch of studies, and they say that the likelihood that a person is going to cast an in-person fraudulent ballot is about as likely as a person who's going to get hit by lightning. They just can't come up with the statistics that show that we have this problem of fraudulent voter, people casting fraudulent ballots, and yet they put in place all of these voter ID laws that tend to keep out of the ballot box people of color, young people. I mean, look at what happened in Texas. In Texas, you have to have a photo ID under the new law that they passed there in order to cast the ballot. Now, if you have a concealed carry photo ID card, that's okay. You can cast the ballot. If you're a student at the University of Texas, you have a state-issued ID with your photo on it, that's not acceptable. Now, what does that tell you about who they're saying? Do you think that's a fair law? All right, concealed carry folks, you can come in. Students, you can't come in. It's clear that they're trying to rig the system. You know, the president talked about during the campaign that the system was rigged. Well, I'm here to tell you the biggest rigged system in this country is the system of gerrymandering and voter ID. What they're trying to do there is rig the system such that people like you don't have the ability to get to the polls in the numbers that you represent. Out of fear, it is a fear that you're going to do things in a progressive way that are inconsistent with the direction that they want to take the country. That's why, and now we also, you know, Scott Walker, he's really kind of he's kind of breathtaking. All right, so that's a nice word. That's a nice word. I could have gone to a different place. I just said breathtaking. You look at what happened. Two state legislators left their positions and joined the administration back in December of last year. Now, the state law says that the governor has to fill those seats as promptly as possible. all right? Scott Walker's decided that he wasn't going to do anything, and he's indicated he wasn't going to have to do anything until there was an election in November. For about a year, people represented by those folks who left the legislature to join his administration were Republicans. Those people would not be represented. Now, Walker was concerned because there was a special election here in Wisconsin, and what was a generally safe Republican seat was won by a Democrat. And he's concerned, yeah, exactly. He's concerned that these two seats in this year, in 2018, might be filled also by Democrats. And so he said, well, we're just not going to do anything. We'll just wait. We'll try to wait this out. And one of the reasons he said we waited out is that there was nothing was going to happen between then and when the election was to take place. Now, just think about this. He's now called a special session. He wants to bring the legislature back into session so that they can talk about school safety measures, which would mean that those districts that are represented by those two folks who have left would have no voice in this special session. And our affiliate, the National Redistricting Foundation, has filed a lawsuit. It basically says, Scott, we said we got to hold a special election, and we filed something just yesterday with the court that says, all right, remember what Scott Walker, breathtaking Scott Walker, what breathtaking Scott Walker said about them doing nothing. Well, look, he's just called a special session. And this just bolsters our argument that you've got to hold these special elections, and you've got to do this as quickly as possible. There's going to be a hearing on this case on March the 22nd, which is next week, and if the court moves, as I hope it will, relatively quickly, we can hold special elections, those people can be represented, and we'll see what the results are. They're afraid of the blue wave. They're afraid of the blue tsunami. They're afraid of people like yourselves. So I'm here today in Wisconsin to try to get you all engaged, get you excited about what's happening here in Wisconsin in 2018, and to talk about one person in particular, and that is Rebecca Dowd. She is running for state Supreme Court here in Wisconsin. She is a progressive. She has a 20-year history as both a prosecutor and as a judge, and who I think is eminently qualified to be the next justice on the Supreme Court of this great state. Now, these are supposed to be nonpartisan elections, and I understand that. But here I am, a Democrat, here supporting her and asking you all to give your support to her. But you know what? I take the world as I find it. It has been reported that we have contributed, I guess, $140,000 to her election effort. But on the other side, the person running against her has the support of the National Rifle Association, the Manufacturers Association. They poured in about $1 million for his election. So, somebody says, wait, if these are nonpartisan elections, what are you doing to this right? And I say, here's the deal. We progressives, we Democrats, have got to get a little tougher, all right? We deal with the world as we find it. Simply because it is technically a nonpartisan election doesn't mean I should look at the way in which it is actually being carried out and say, all right, I'm going to play by these nonpartisan rules, I'm not going to do anything. While on this side, people are contributing huge amounts of money, doing all that they can to elect somebody to the Supreme Court who will not reflect my values. Now, as I said, $140,000 is a significant amount of money, but it shrinks in comparison to that which has been spent on the other side. So, April the 3rd, there is an election. We need you all to get out there and support Rebecca Dowd for Wisconsin State Supreme Court. It's another one of these things. April 3rd is, I guess, a Tuesday. I assume you have classes. I will be, again, signing cut slips for anybody who needs to miss a class on that day. I'll even let my daughter, get going there. Even with that GPA that she's got, I'm going to let her go. She's got a pretty good GPA, to be honest. But I hope that you will find the time during the course of that day to get to the polls. Make sure that you have the appropriate ID, the right kind of photo ID. You can register on the day of the election, know where you're supposed to go, and then take people with you. Young people need to be heard. Progressives need to be heard on April the 3rd. April 3rd, Rebecca Dowd, State Supreme Court. In the fall, you're going to have another opportunity to deal with breathtaking Scott Walker. And I'm being kind, I'm not doing anything else, I'm being appropriate here. Governor Scott Walker, who's running for a third term. Franklin Roosevelt is the only president in this country who was elected 3 times, actually elected 4 times. And I can tell you one thing, Scott Walker is no Franklin Roosevelt. Responsible for the New Deal, got us out of the Depression, won World War II. That's Franklin Roosevelt, 3rd term, 4th term. That's fine. I can actually kind of justify that. Scott Walker's looking for a 3rd term. And the basis for that would be, exactly. So you all got to be active between now and November. Democrats are going through, got a whole bunch of people trying to run. We'll see who comes out of the Democratic primary, I guess, in August. Hopefully that will be a very progressive person that you all can get behind. But if we're going to attack this problem of gerrymandering, it is really incumbent upon you all to make sure that you vote in November, to get other people to vote in November, and make sure that your voices are counted. Because the reality is, we can overcome these gerrymandered seats, but only if we have huge numbers of people coming out. And if we overcome these gerrymandered seats and elect a progressive legislature, a progressive governor, we can then undo the gerrymandering that was done, because there's going to be redistricting in 2021. And the people who were elected in 2018 will be the people who are in charge of redistricting in 2021. We don't want to have happen in 2021 what happened in 2011. And so we need you all to get out there and vote, get other people to vote, and make sure that we have a good turnout in that election come November of this year. We have a system now under this gerrymandering where politicians are actually picking their voters by the way in which they draw the lines. What we want to have is a system where citizens are picking their elected representatives, and you can make that happen. And to the extent that people think, well, these seats are so gerrymandered, it's going to be difficult for progressives to win. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. But I'm now looking at Congressman Connor Lamb from Pennsylvania. I'm now looking at Senator from Alabama, who wasn't supposed to win. I'm looking at what happened in Virginia, where progressives came out and in record numbers almost took back the state assembly. And that shows you the problem. There was a wave there, a 10-point differential between Republicans and Democratic vote. And yet we were not able to overtake them and take back the state assembly. That was a wave election. And you remember there was the coin toss to decide who was going to actually control the state assembly. So, and don't think you or anybody else think that, a single vote doesn't count. Because in Virginia, that race was essentially, it was tied. It was a tie vote in the critical deciding district. And ultimately, a coin toss had to be flipped in order to decide who was going to represent the people there. And ultimately, the decision made as to who would control the assembly in that state. We are talking about, I think, basic fairness. What we are trying to do as Democrats, as part of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, is to bring fairness back to the process. I want to make very clear, in 2021, I'm not advocating gerrymandering Democrats or gerrymandering for progressives. I'm saying that if we have a level playing field, and this is a battle between Democratic and progressive ideas, and Republican and conservative ideas, that Democrats and progressives will do just fine if we have a fair playing field. But it means we're going to have to fight between now and then to make sure that that happens. 2018 is a make or break year because, as I said, the people who are elected this year will be the ones who will be in position in 2021 to decide those districts. So again, volunteer, vote on April the 3rd, be involved in the latter part of this year in November. This is really about our future. And so I would hope that you will work with NextGen volunteers also from For Our Future, to really mobilize the people in this state to make sure that we have the kind of turnout that we're going to need. It is not going to be enough for people to turn out in traditional numbers. We need people to come out, given the gerrymandering that we have to overcome. We need to have people come out in record numbers. So that means every one of you's got to vote, and you got to take people with you to vote. You've got to energize people. You've got to understand you've got to have photo ID. You've got to understand where you go. You've got to register people to vote. we need record numbers of people to overcome the unfair system that we're dealing with, so that come 2021, we can have a system that is more fair, more consistent with our founding documents. I'm confident that we can do that, because I'm confident about you. So again, March 24th, we're going to hear the voices of young people, including yours. And I think this is just kind of building into a wave. You know, it took a tragedy in Florida to mobilize these young people in high schools all around the country. I hope that their voices will be heard. I hope that they will inspire people like you, and even people like myself, you know, people who are much older, to become more involved, to become more concerned about the state of our democracy. So let's all work hard. Let's do everything we possibly can to take our democracy back from those who are trying to take it away from us. Now, with that, I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that you have. All right.
First of all, let's give another round of applause. So your words really impressed upon me something my mom said to me no one's going to help you unless you help yourself. And I think the first step to helping ourselves is knowing what you said. And the next thing we need to do is organize. So I asked some folks in the crowd who are, I'm sure you guys are all organizers, right? In your own type of way. And these are some of the questions that they had. Besides voting, what can we do to combat gerrymandering for the voter? And are there any GOT operations that are especially good work and deserve our support?
You know, besides voting, I would say that organizing really is, you know, the important thing. You know, working for our future, working with NextGen. I mean, you know, that's the way you amplify your voice. When you go into a polling place, you are singular in nature, but that is unbelievably important. I think it is our responsibility as citizens of this great country. And I also think that, you know, in making that decision, you know, I'm a little tired, I'm gonna vote. You know, you think about the people who sacrificed, who gave their lives in order that everybody in this country might have the ability to vote. Now, you're not old enough to remember 1963, where civil rights workers gave their lives in Mississippi. People tend to forget that the reason they were in Mississippi was to register people to vote. You know, Cheney, Schroeder, that was all about getting people the right to vote. The 1965 Voting Rights Act was really called the crown jewel of the civil rights movement because it gave people the right to vote. And so if you are going to pay the appropriate respect to people who sacrifice, you have to vote. And you dishonor them. You dishonor them if you do not vote. And I think it's also your responsibility to make sure that other people vote as well. So I would say, as I said, organizing is the thing to make sure that you do. You're all young, you've got great legs, you know, you're in shape. And there are some people who are not so young. But you look to be like you're in great shape. You got good legs too. So this is not something that is only for the young. This is for those who are young at heart as well. And I hope that everybody would, again, do that singular thing that is important, which is to cast a ballot yourself, but to think broader and come up with ways in which you get other people involved in the process. But as I said, we need people to come out in record numbers in Wisconsin, given the gerrymandered seats, the gerrymandered districts that people will be voting on. Okay.
The next question we had was about the Supreme Court race. Folks just want to know, what were your thoughts and predictions of
Hey, I'll tell you the outcome. If we do the right thing, if you guys, you know, I'm here, I've been in this state, and doing other things in connection with this race. I think if we work hard, if we turn out people, that Rebecca Dowd will be the next Supreme Court justice. I'm really confident about that. I think she should be. I don't think there's any question about that she should. I think she's more qualified. I think she has the things that I think are important in a judge. She's obviously ethical. She's got the experience, but she's also got this compassion, which I think is really important in judging. You know, I don't like people who think about judging or even being prosecutors who have this, you know, lock them up attitude. Kind of what we see now. in the Justice Department that I left behind. I mean, if there's a difference between me and Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, hey, it's his name. That's his name. That's his name. That's his name. There is a difference between us is that he's taken us back to the 1980s, where we had these draconian mandatory minimum sentences where judges didn't look at an individual who was before them and decide what an appropriate sentence was based on who the person was, what the nature of the crime was, what that person's background was all about. He wants to go back to this kind of factory thing when we put people in jail for 20 and 30 years for sentences that, for crimes that were born in much smaller sentences. And Rebecca strikes me as the kind, Judge Dallin strikes me as the kind of judge who will inject that degree of compassion, rationality into the system, as opposed to her opponent, who is, again, supported by, the gun lobby and those who want to take us back to, I think, what is a discredited past.
And one last question. So with Conor Lamb winning in Pennsylvania, the 18th congressional district, we have a similarly gerrymandered districts here in Wisconsin. How would you recommend getting out to vote in similar districts in Wisconsin? How do we organize those districts?
Yeah, we have to get down to the basics. I was with President Obama starting from the beginning. In 2007, I remember going to Iowa. And, I'll be honest with you. I thought, all right, I think he's a great senator. He's becoming a friend. Now has become a friend. And I thought this was a pretty idealistic thing when we were involved. I wasn't at all certain that we were going to win. And so we did all the things that you have to do. We knocked on doors. We interacted with people. We held forums. I remember in an Iowa forum in a library, I think it was Washington, Iowa, and 4 people showed up. 4 people with their notepads. In Iowa, they take this stuff really serious. And I had spent like an hour and a half with 4 people. But as a result of people like me interacting with 4 people and then, talking to larger crowds, and because we had a great candidate, we won Iowa and by an unexpected margin. But it's doing the basics. It's meeting people where they are. Whether it's going to shopping centers, everybody's going to the Black Panther, and you see people as they're coming out of there, I think that's still the #1 movie. And everybody ought to be seeing it if you haven't. It's pretty interesting. Killmonger, anyway. It's a pretty interesting movie. So, find people, where they are. Work with the organizations who are involved in this effort. Sign up with volunteers who are, I guess, going to be here and will be able to take your name and be able to direct you in ways that you can do things effectively. But it really comes down to the basics. This is about blocking and tackling. They try to put in place a system that's going to prevent us, people, from being successful. But we can overcome that system. They told Conor Lamb that he couldn't win. Told him that he couldn't win. They told us that we couldn't win in Virginia. They told us that we couldn't win in Alabama. They told us we couldn't win here in Wisconsin. We couldn't win in Minnesota. And we just keep winning. But we keep winning because people keep showing up. People keep showing up. So as I said, I hope that, as I say, for our future, NextGen, we've got people here that we can sign up with. I see things back here. So sign up, but don't do more than, you got to do more than sign up. You got to sign up, and then you got to be prepared to, like I did, meet those 4 people. Spend an hour and a half. That's a long time, spending 4 people. Maybe you don't have to go quite that far. Spend a reasonable amount of time, with however large the crowd is, and bring the message to them and let them know that they can have an impact on the system.
All right, thank you.
All right. One last thing. I'm an optimistic person about, I think, the direction of this country. We are in a period that is what I would call a setback. I think we're on a pretty good arc of progress during the Obama years. Those were tough years. It was tough for President Obama to do the things that he did because I think of the unprincipled opposition that he faced. In the end, in spite of all that, he did some really consequential things, and I think history is going to be extremely kind to him. change is not promised. It doesn't just happen. Civil rights movement didn't happen simply because people decided, let's do the right thing. No, it was because people did things, people put their lives on the line. People, as John Lewis said, made good trouble. And this is another time for us to make good trouble. You know, it's time for us to become involved. Dr. King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, and it bends towards justice. But that arc doesn't bend towards justice on its own. It bends towards justice when people actually put their hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. And that's what I think is the responsibility of each and every one of us. We're going to put our hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. If you don't do that, it's not going to happen. And people who are less idealistic, less qualified, less committed to the ideals of this country will be the ones who will serve in the positions that determine the fate and the policy of this nation over the course of the next 10 years at least, and maybe, you know, over the course of this century. Now, you young people especially, you have the ability to shape what America is going to look like in the 21st century. And every opportunity you have to take advantage of that ability to shape it, you got to seize that opportunity. And now you have the opportunity to be third, along with that Wisconsin Supreme Court seat, and there are going to be other people on the ballot as well that you should be voting for. Progressive, you should be voting for. You'll have that opportunity in November of this year when it comes to shaping the direction of the state. And you're going to obviously have it in 2020 when you can shape the direction of this nation when it comes to who should be president of the United States. You got to seize those opportunities. I'm really confident that if you all stay committed, if you stay focused, if you will get out there and act, that we can change the direction of this nation and really kind of cap this experience that we now have, this administration that we now have, and make this something that's just an aberration, and that, you know, we'll get beyond. As I said, progress is not something that is promised, and there are setbacks along the way. We're in the middle of a setback. There's no question about that. But if you work hard, if you stay committed, we can make the kind of progress that I know brought you here this morning and that this country deserves. So get out there and do it. All right? Do it. Thank you.
Before you all leave, I don't know how to follow that up. He definitely spoke some prophetic words and spoke to why we're doing the work that we're doing. I'm going to hand it off to Jared. He's one of our fellows here with NextGen, and he's going to talk to you about how you can actively volunteer and get engaged with us and help us organize. Let's give a round of applause for Jared.
You guys hear me? Good morning. Thank you so much, Attorney General Eric Holder, for joining us and speaking such riveting words. It's truly an honor to be here in your presence. And good morning, everybody. I'm Jared Glassberry. I'm the Vice President of NextGen America, of NextGen America. As Attorney General Holder said, this election on April 3rd is critically important to Wisconsin students and non-students alike. We cannot afford to stay home. On April 3rd, we need your guys' help to get students to the polls. If the past year has taught us anything, it's that elections have consequences and every vote counts. Remind your friends to register early if they have spring break plans. Remind people that if they're an out-of-state student, they need to go get a voter ID from the WISC ID offices. If you care about redistricting reform or climate change or voting rights, those issues are on the ballot April 3rd. So sign up to volunteer with one of the NextGen volunteers and help us get the campus out to vote. And if you're not a student, make sure that you talk to somebody with 4 Hour Action to get involved. Thank you.